everyone, and welcome to my Tolkien Reading Day special. Tolkien Reading Day is something that is put on by the Tolkien Society every year on March 25th, and March 25th marks the destruction of the One Ring. So every year they put out something for people to read and share their favorite passages from Tolkien. And in 2025, the theme is fellowship and community. So I'm going to be reading some excerpts. Two of them are from the Fellowship of the Ring, and one is from the Return of the King that have to do with that theme. And so the first reading is going to be in Fellowship of the Ring, starting in the Council of Elrond, and it's about how the Fellowship of the Ring first started. Very well, Master Elrond, said Bilbo suddenly. Say no more. It's plain enough that what you are pointing at. Bilbo, the silly hobbit, started this affair, and Bilbo had better finish it. Or himself. I was very comfortable here, and getting on with my book. If you want to know, I'm just writing an ending for it. I had thought of Pudding, and he lived happily ever afterwards to the very end of his days. It was a good ending, and none the worse for having been used before. And I shall have to alter it. It does not look like it's coming true. And anyway, there will evidently have to be several more chapters if I have to write them. It is a frightful nuisance when I ought to start. Boromir looked in surprise at Bilbo, but the laughter died on his lips when he saw that all the others regarded the old hobbit with grave respect. Only Glóin smiled, but his smile came from old memories. Of course, my dear Bilbo, said Gandalf. If you had really started this affair, you might be expected to finish it. But you know well enough now that starting is too great a claim for any, and that only a small part is played in the great deeds by any hero. You need not bow. Though the word was meant, we do not doubt that under jest you are making a valiant offer. But one beyond your strength, Bilbo. You cannot take this back. It has passed on. If you need my advice any longer, I should say that your part is ended, unless as a recorder. Finish your book and leave the ending unaltered. There is still hope for it, but get ready to write a sequel when they come back. Bilbo laughed. I have never known you to give me pleasant advice before, and as all your unpleasant advice has been good, I wonder if this advice is not bad. Still, I don't suppose I have the strength or luck left to deal with the ring. It has grown, and I have not. But tell me, what do you mean by they? The messengers who are sent with the ring. Exactly, and who are they to be? That seems to me what this council has to decide, and all that it has to decide. Elves may thrive on speech alone, and dwarves endure greatness. But I am only an old hobbit, and I miss my meal noon. Can we think of some names now, or put it off till after dinner? No one answered. The noon bell rang. Still no one spoke. Frodo glanced at all the faces, but they were not turned to him. All the council sat with their downcast eyes, as if deep in thought. A great dread fell on him, as if he was awaiting the pronouncement of some doom that had been long foreseen, and vainly hoped might, after all never be spoken. An overwhelming longing to rest and remain at peace by Bilbo's side in Rivendell filled all his heart. At last, with an effort he spoke, and wondered with his own words, as if some other was using his small voice. I will take the ring, he said, though I do not know the way. Elrond raised his eyes and looked at him, and Frodo felt his heart pierced by sudden keenness of the glance. If I understand all right that I have heard, he said, I think that this task is appointed to you, Frodo, and if you do not find a way, no one will. This is the hour of the Shire folk, when they arise from their quiet fields to shake the towers and the councils of the great. Who of all the wise would have foreseen it? Or, if they are wise, why should they expect to know it until this hour has struck? But it is a heavy burden, so heavy that no one could lay it on another, and I do not lay it on you, but if you take it freely, I will take your choice, though all the mighty elf friends of old, Hadar and Húrin and Túrin and Beren himself were assembled together, your seat should be among them. But I won't send him off alone, surely, master, Sam cried, unable to contain himself any longer and jumping up from the corner where he had quietly been sitting on the floor. No, indeed, said Elrond, turning towards him with a great smile. You at least shall go with him. It is hardly possible to separate you from him, even when he is summoned to a secret council and you are not. Sam sat down, blushing and muttering. A nice pickle we've landed ourselves in, Mr. Frodo, he said, shaking his head. Elrond summoned the hobbits to him. He looked gravely at Frodo. The time has come, he said. If the ring is to set out, it must go soon. But those who go with it must not count their errand by being forced or aided. They must pass the domain of the enemy far from aid. Do you still hold your word, Frodo, that you will be the ring bearer? I do, said Frodo, and I will go with Sam. Then I cannot help you much, not even with counsel, said Elrond. I can foresee very little of your road, and how your task is to be achieved, I do not know. The shadow has crept now to the feet of the mountains, and draws nigh even to the borders of the Grey Flood. Under the shadow, all is dark to it. You will meet many foes, some open, some disguised, and you may find a friend upon your way when you least look for it. I will send out messages, such as I can contrive, to those whom I know in the wide world. But so perilous are the lands now become that some may well miscarry, or come no quicker than you yourself. And I will choose you companions to go with you, as far as they will or fortune allows. The number must be few, since your hope is speed and secrecy. Had I a host of elves in armor in the elder days, it would avail little, save to arouse the power of Mordor. The company of the ring shall be 9, and the 9 walkers shall set out against the 9 riders that are evil. With you and your faithful servant, Gandalf will go, for he shall be great in task, and he may end all his labors. For the rest, they shall represent the other free peoples of the world, elves, dwarves, and men. Legolas shall be for the elves, and Gimli son of Glóin for the dwarves. They will be willing to go with you, at least to the passes of the mountains, and maybe beyond. For men, you shall have Aragorn son of Arathorn, for the ring of Isildur concerns him closely. Strider! Cried Frodo. Yes, he said with a smile. I ask leave once again to be your companion, Frodo. I would have begged for you to come, said Frodo. I only thought you were going to Minas Tirith with Boromir. I am, said Aragorn, and the sword that was broken shall be reforged ere we go to war. But your road and our road lie together for many hundreds of miles. Therefore Boromir will also be in the company. He is a valiant man. There remain 2 more to be found, said Elrond. These I will consider. Of my household, I may find some that it seems good to me to send. But that will leave no place for us, cried Pippin in dismay. We don't want to be left behind. We want to go with Frodo. That is because you do not understand and cannot imagine what lies ahead, said Elrond. Neither does Frodo, said Gandalf, unexpectedly supporting Pippin, nor do any of us see clearly. It is true that if the hobbits understood the danger, they would not dare to go. But they would wish to go, or wish they would have dared, and be shamed and unhappy. I think, Elrond, that in this matter, be well to trust rather to friendship than to great wisdom. Even if you chose for us an elf lord such as Glorfindel, he could not storm the Dark Tower, nor open the road to the fire by the power that is in him. You speak gravely, said Elrond, but I am in doubt. The Shire I forebode is not free now from peril. And these 2 I had thought to send back there as messengers, and do what they could, according to the fashion of their country, to warn people of the danger. In any case, I judged that the younger of these 2, Peregrine Took, should remain. My heart is against his going. Then, Master Elrond, you'll have to lock me in prison or send me home tied in a sack, said Pippin, for otherwise I shall follow the company. Let it be so, then. You shall go, said Elrond as he sighed. Now, the 9 is filled. In 7 days the company must depart. The next one I want to read is at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring, and it just has to do with kind of the community of the hobbits. Tongues began to wag in Hobbiton and Bywater, and rumor of the coming event traveled all over the Shire. The history and the character of Mr. Bilbo became once again the chief topic of conversation, and the older folk suddenly found themselves reminiscent in welcome demand. No one had more attentive audience than old Ham Gamgee, commonly known as the Gaffer. He held forth in the Ivy Bush, a small inn in Bywater Road, and he began to talk with some authority, for he had tended the garden Bag End for 40 years, and had helped the old Holman in the same job before that. Now that he was himself growing old and stiff in the joints, the job was mainly carried out by his youngest son, Sam Gamgee. Both father and son were on very friendly terms with Bilbo and Frodo. They had lived on the hill itself, in number 3 Bagshot Road, just below Bag End. A very nice, well-spoken, gentle hobbit is Mr. Bilbo, and I've always said Gaffer declared, with perfect truth, for Bilbo was polite to him, calling him Master Hamfast, and consulting with him constantly upon the growing of vegetables. In the matter of roots, especially potatoes, the Gaffer was recognized as the leading authority by all in the neighborhood, including himself. What about this Frodo that lives with him, old Noakes of Bywater? Baggins is his name, but he's more than half Brandybuck, they say. It beats me why any of the Baggins of Hobbiton should go looking for a wife away there in Buckland, where folks are so queer. And no wonder they're queer, put in Daddy Tootfoot, the Gaffer's next-door neighbor. If they live on the wrong side of the Brandywine River and right next to the Old Forest, that's a dark, bad place, if half the tales be true. You're right, Dad, said the Gaffer. Not that the Brandybucks of Buckland live in the Old Forest, but they're a queer breed seemingly. They foul about with their boats on that big river, and that isn't natural. Small wonder that trouble came of it, I say. But be that as it may, Mr. Frodo is a nice young hobbit as you could wish to meet. Very much like Mr. Bilbo. And in more than looks. After all, his father was a Baggins. A decent, respectable hobbit was Drogo Baggins. There was never much to tell of him, till he was drowned. Drowned? Said several other voices. They had heard this and other dark rumors before, of course, but hobbits have a passion for family history, and they were ready to hear it again. Well, so they say, said the Gaffer. You see, Mr. Drogo, he married poor Miss Primula Brandybuck. She was our Mr. Bilbo's first cousin on his mother's side, her mother being the youngest of the old Duke's daughters, and Mr. Drogo was his second cousin. So Mr. Frodo is his first and second cousin, once removed either way, and, as the saying is, if you follow me, Mr. Drogo was staying at Brandybuck Hall with his father-in-law, and old Master Gorbadoc, as he often did after his marriage, him being partial to the victuals of the old Gorbak, keeping a mighty generous table. And he went out boating on the Brandywine River. He and his wife were drowned, and poor Mr. Frodo was only a child and all. I've heard they were on the water after dinner in the moonlight, said old Noakes, and it was Drogo's weight that sunk the boat. And I heard she pushed him in, and he pulled him in after him, said Sandyman, the old Hobbiton miller. You shouldn't listen to all you hear, Sandyman, said the Gaffer, who did not much like the miller. There is no call to go about talking of pushing and pulling. Boats are quite tricky enough for those who sit without looking further than for cause of trouble. Anyway, there was this Mr. Frodo, left an orphan and stranded, as you might say, among all those queer Bucklanders, being brought up by anyhow in Brandy Hall. A regular warren by all accounts. Old Master Gorbadoc never had fewer than a couple of hundred relations in the place. Mr. Bilbo never did a kinder deed than when he brought the lad back to live among decent folk. But I reckon that was a nasty knock for those Sackville Bagginses. They thought they were going to get Bag End that time when he was off, and they thought he was dead, and then he comes back and orders them off. Then he goes on living and never getting a day older. Bless him. Suddenly he talks of an heir, and has all the papers made out and proper. Sackville Baggins won't ever see the inside of Bag End now, or it is hoped not. There's a tidy bit of money tucked away up there, I tell you, said a stranger, a visitor on business from Mitchell Delving in the West Farthing. All the top of your hill is full of tunnels packed with chests full of gold, silver, and jewels, by what I've heard. Then you've heard more than I can speak to, answered the Gaffer. I know nothing about jewels. Mr. Bilbo is free with his money, and there never seems to be no lack of it. But I know of no tunnels. I saw Mr. Bilbo when he came back, a matter of 60 years ago when I was a lad. It was not long come pretense to the old Holman, him being my dad's cousin. But he had me put up at Bag End, helping him to keep folks from trampling and trespassing all over the garden while the sale was going on. And in the middle of it, Mr. Bilbo comes up the hill with a pony and some mighty big bags and a couple of chests. I don't doubt that they were mostly full of treasure he had picked up in foreign parts, where there be mountains of gold, they say. But there wasn't enough to fill tunnels. But my old lad Sam will know more about that. He's in and out of Bag End. Crazy stories of the old days, he is, and he listens to all Mr. Bilbo's tales. Mr. Bilbo has learned him his letters, meaning no harm, mark you, and I hope no harm will come of it. Elves and dragons, I said to him. Cabbages and potatoes are better for you and me. Don't go getting mixed up in business of yours betters, or you'll land in trouble too big for you, I says to him, and I might say it to others, he added with a look at the stranger and the miller. But the gaffer did not convince his audience. The legend of Bilbo's wealth was now too firmly fixed in the minds of the younger generation of hobbits. Ah, but he has likely enough been adding to what he brought at first, argued the miller, voicing common opinion. He often is away from home, and look at the outlandish folk that visit him, dwarves coming at night, and that old wanderer conjurer Gandalf, and all. You can say what you like, gaffer, but Bag End's a queer place, and its folk are queerer. And you can say what you like about what you know more of than you do of boating, Mr. Sandman, retorted the gaffer, disliking the miller even more than usual. It's that being queer, then, that we should do with more queerness in these parts. There's some not far away that wouldn't offer a pint of beer to a friend if they lived in a hole with garden walls, but they do things proper, Bag End. Our Sam says that everyone's going to be invited to the party. And there's going to be presents, Marky. Presents for all. This very month as is. So I just wanted to read that one as the hobbits are just sitting around and talking the Ivy Bush Inn about just shows what a little bit of the community of the hobbits are like and what it would be like to be living in Hobbiton or living in the Shire. And the last part that I want to read is from the last part in the Grey Havens. Then Elrond and Galadriel rode on, for the Third Age was over, and the days of the rings were past, and at an end was some of the story and songs of times. With them went many elves of the high kindred, who would no longer stay in Middle-earth, and among them, filled with sadness that was blessed and without bitterness, rode Sam and Frodo and Bilbo, and the elves delighted to honor them. Though they rode through the mists of the Shire, all the evening and all the night, none saw them pass save the wild creatures, or here and there some wanderer in the dark, who saw a swift shimmer in the trees, or a light and shadow flowing through the grass as the moon went westward. And when they had passed from the Shire, going about the south skirts of the White Downs, they came to the Far Downs and to the towers, and they looked at the distant sea, and so they rode down to last to Mithland, to the Grey Havens, in the long firth of Loon. And they came to the gates. Círdan the shipwright came forth to greet them. Very tall he was, and his beard was long, and he was gray and old, save that his eyes were keen as stars. And he looked at them and bowed, and he said, "All is now ready." Then Círdan led them to the Grey Havens, and there was a white ship lying, and upon the quay, beside a grey horse, stood a figure robed in all white, awaiting them. As he turned and came toward them, Frodo saw that Gandalf now wore openly on his hand the third ring, Narya the Great, and the stone upon it was red as fire. Then those who were to go were glad, for they knew that Gandalf would also take the ship with them. But Sam was sorrowful at heart, and it seemed to him that if the parting were to be bitter, more grievous still would be the long road home, alone. But even as he stood there, and the elves were going aboard, and all was being made ready to depart, up rode Merry and Pippin in great haste, and amid his tears Pippin laughed. "You've tried to give us the slip once before and failed," said Frodo, he said. "This time you have nearly succeeded, but you would have failed again if it was not for Sam, though, that gave it away this time, but Gandalf himself." "Yes," said Gandalf, for it will be better to ride back 3 together than 1 alone. Well, here at last, dear friends, on the shores of the sea comes the end of our fellowship in Middle-earth. Go in peace. I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are needed. Then Frodo kissed Merry and Pippin, and last of all Sam, and went aboard, and sailed, and the sails were drawn up, and the wind blew, and slowly the ship slipped away down the long grey firth, and the light for the glass of Galadriel that Frodo bore glimmered and was lost. And the ship went into the high sea and passed into the west, until at last, on the night of rain, Frodo smelled the sweet fragrance in the air and heard the sound of singing that came of water. And it seemed to him that his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and beheld the white shores and beyond them a far greener country under a swift sunrise. But to Sam the evening deepened into darkness. As he stood at the haven, and he looked at the gray sea, he saw only a shadow on the waters, and was soon lost to the west. There he stood, still in the moonlight, hearing only the sigh and murmur of the waves on the shores of Middle-earth, and the sound of them sank deep into his heart. Beside him stood Merry and Pippin, and they were silent. At last, the three companions turned away, never again looking back as they rode slowly homewards, and they spoke no word to one another until they came back to the Shire. But each had great comfort in his friends on the long grey road. At last, they rode over the downs and took the east road, and then Merry and Pippin rode on to Buckland. And already they were singing again as they went, but Sam turned to Bywater, and so came back up the hill, as day was ending once more. And he went on, and there was yellow light, with fire within, and evening meal was ready, and he was expected. And Rose drew him in, set him in his chair, and put little Eleanor in his lap. He drew a deep breath. "Well, I'm back," he said. Well, thank you for joining me and for Tolkien Reading Day 2025, and I hope you are all inspired to go and read more Tolkien and just get more into his world and into Middle-earth.